Hey Marino, hey Nick.
Hey,
Just add.
hey, Concha.
Hey.
I think
Yeah, I'm adding in
yeah, I'm a co-host now, so we should be good.
Yep.
Awesome. How are you doing?
Uh, I'm doing great. I'm excited for this space.
Nice, nice. Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Me too. Let's bring up Nick.
Yeah, I've sent an invite. I hope he has joined from his through phone.
Yeah, Nick, if you can hear us, make sure you join from your phone and not from your browser.
Hey, can you all hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you
All right.
now.
Yeah, I reset my security settings on Twitter and realized that I didn't give it access to my microphone. My bad.
I'll just wait for a couple of minutes and then we can start the space, like just 1 or 2 minutes.
So Marino, how cold is it by you, dude?
It's not that bad. It's actually kind of nice. Probably about just over 40, which is bearable, tolerable. I think for
Okay.
December we should usually drop down to about 30-ish or so, but you know what? I will take anything warmer than it normally should be. How about you? Where are you at again? I can't remember.
Just north of Atlanta.
Oh, so it's so
It's
it's like nice and warm for you, basically.
well, I mean, it's all relative. If you stay in a place long enough, you normalize to that place, right? So I'm pretty cold, but you would laugh at me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, north of Atlanta, like, are you talking about an hour north? Are you talking about several hours north? 20 minutes north?
So Atlanta, we've got this thing called inside the perimeter and outside the perimeter. The
Okay.
perimeter is this expressway called 285.
Yeah.
Um, Before I had kids 11 years ago, my wife and I were super cool, and we lived inside the perimeter
Nice.
in Midtown.
Hmm.
And then we needed space and thus had to move further out. So I'm like 10 minutes north of the perimeter, probably on a non-traffic ride, 30 minutes from Midtown. But with traffic, that could be an hour and a half.
The last time I was in Atlanta was for me to go up to a place called Cleveland, which is, I think, 45 to an hour north of Atlanta. And don't ask me why I was there.
Yeah, I'm
But
very curious.
yeah, there's a school slash church that needed to get a SAN installed a while back and some networking stuff. We're talking like, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago. I can't even remember at this point. And it was interesting to just go up there and realize how vastly
Yeah.
different it was in comparison to Atlanta, considering I've been to Atlanta before. And
Yeah, so that place is so I don't live in that
I don't
much
know
of a
that
suburban
place.
place. I'll also say this. Y'all heard it here. That was Marino going to buy probably like an AK-47 from North Georgia.
What?
So
No. That's not me. I'm not a gun person. I've never been.
I know.
Yeah.
Jokes. Jokes.
I know. I know. All right. Let's get on with the show. Thanks for coming, Nick. I'm gonna pass it over to Kansha to kick us off.
Yeah. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome for today's Twitter space. And today we have Nick with us. So today's discussion is all about technical debt and platform building. And I feel it should be addressed within organization. So before coming to the why, I first want to set up a bit of context for anyone unaware of what's a technical debt and why that matters. So imagine this, you are working in a promising startup, and right now your focus is only on speed, getting products and features shipped out as quickly as possible. In this phase, you don't care about the technical stuff or how you should optimize things in the best possible way. As I mentioned, all you care about here is making something that works and works well enough to ship out to users. So, this kind of technical debt can also be caused in an agile development style where you have to get something done in a particular time frame. While they may seem like a quick fix in the short term, they can have severe consequences in the long run, because as your organization scales, you start getting more and more users. The existing solution isn't going to be as efficient as it used to be. Something needs to be changed, and in the worst possible scenario, you are going to have to do a complete rewrite of the product. So this is what we call as technical debt, where you don't stop to consider the tech stack or product architecture and so on, and want to create and ship something that just works. It could be intentional or unintentional. Now, coming over to platform engineering, we already know that the main goal of platforms is to boost the developer velocity. Now, the great thing is that platform engineering can actually help reduce or completely eliminate the tech debt within your new features. But let's say that you already have a product that is market ready and a lot of folks are already using it. Now you want to create a developer platform to accelerate your development velocity while having all the benefits of the platform. However, you have already got a ton of tech debt within your existing product. What are you going to do about it? So, this is what our space is all about today. And we are going to have an exciting chat with Nick, who will share all his experiences, all about platform building and technical debt. In the meantime, if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and we will be happy to take them up later. Now, I will pass on to Nick, and also, okay, we have Kat as well, and welcome in the space. And Nick, please feel free to give yourself a quick intro and also let us know your insights on this intersection between platforms and technical debt.
Wow, thank you, Concha. That was amazing. I think she could just drop the mic. We could probably turn this off. There's not really much else to talk about. No, hey, y'all. My name is Nick Eberts. I'm a product manager working on GKE. We have a multi-cluster fleets thing. That's what I do there. But this topic is just near and dear to my heart. Really nothing to do with product or googly things. Just spent a lot of time in my career working on building platforms on top of infrastructure, including Kubernetes, and I have some opinions on things. And excuse me, you have to pardon me with my cough. But one of the things that's sort of interesting to me is that we have now a much more aggressive market that's going after building platform engineerings, right? So you have a lot of companies out there that are building services to help you build platforms on top of Kubernetes. And then one of the things that you have to figure out is when you're deciding on how and when you're going to build a platform, you have to look at the existing applications that you have. It's not just about the net new quote unquote cloud native applications. It's about how do you keep the lights on? How do you improve with applications that are already running today that are generating revenue that may not fit into a very fancy new model? And so that's the balance that you have to strike. If you're only building a platform to support greenfield applications purpose built like today, as opposed to ones that are earning revenue, now you're maintaining a platform for your new stuff and a platform for your old stuff. And you might say that maintaining those two platforms could be more costly than just trying to figure out how to distill down to the lowest common denominator. Um, I'm gonna pass it around a little bit. I'd love for this to be more of a Q&A and have conversations with everybody else on here. But that's kind of the upfront summary of where I'm coming from and what I feel.
Yeah, Marino, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to break this down into two subtopics first, and then we can bridge them back as we get closer to the end of the space. Because while platforms and tech debt have a lot in common, let's start with tech debt, right? Let's start with the whole concept of shiny object syndrome and how that contributes heavily to tech debt. And look, every organization and within an organization, every level will face some level of shiny object syndrome. And I bring this up because when you think about how organizations build their platforms, build systems, build solutions, there's a process. They don't just suddenly start building for the sake of building. There's an end goal. But the reality is that when you look at that end goal and you have dates affixed to that end goal, right? You're working towards it, and then you start to realize, oh shit, there's constraints with the technology stack we decide to use, and those constraints start to pop up as you get closer and closer to that date, as you get closer to the end of that project. You start to realize this wasn't the right stack. And then you have a decision point. You can continue to build on that and then live with some of those decisions, which in itself is technical debt, because maybe earlier on there wasn't enough due diligence done to begin with. But on the other hand, you could drop all of that and then basically gravitate towards something that might be able to get you 95% of the way there. And that 5% is that additional custom work that you have to put in to reach your end goal. But in both situations and circumstances, there will always be some form of technical debt that's created. Now, what is that technical debt? A bunch of code that was written that is not usable anymore. A bunch of hardware that was procured that has no purpose because the direction of where we want to store our apps are no longer on premises, it's now in the cloud. Or the other way around. We've basically invested maybe $250,000 into cloud resources, but we've decided we're not going to use the cloud, but we've already prepaid for this, and now we have credits that we can't really use. So there's a lot of different ways you can analyze technical debt. Then you start to realize that this technical debt continues to compound over the years and it just gets ignored. Now, on one hand, accounting and finance teams have a very elegant way of being able to write a lot of this off and look at it as a financial loss and whatever. At the end of the day, businesses really don't care. But what actually is happening underneath the scenes is if you think about all of that garbage we create whenever we go to a store and buy some, prepackaged food, and that prepackaged food comes in plastic that we end up throwing into the wrapper, what happens to it? So I bring this up because this very same situation is occurring in tech today. We have cloud instances that we don't turn down. That is creating technical debt because that's wearing down the hardware that some of these instances are running on top of. That in itself is another form of technical debt where we're just consuming unnecessarily. And that also ties to sustainability. So there's a lot of different angles here around technical debt and so many different directions we can go. Nick, why don't you tell us, in your years of building products and product management, where have you encountered technical debt?
So, my former career, so I've only been PMing for about a year and a half, but most of my experience around platform building and distributed systems was doing customer engineering work, right? So I was a customer engineer for Google and Azure previous to that. And then previous to that, I worked for some financial companies building distributed systems. And I just want to say that tech debt is the word itself comes with a heavy weight and I think a negative connotation, but like everything comes with tech debt. It's just what's acceptable for your business, right? So one of the things that I wish that I could turn back time and do when I was working in financial services was have that approach of, okay, you know what, like this trade-off's worth it because this particular set of applications are generating revenue, right? So the debt that I take on for this particular stack is actually worth it. Um, so I just wanted to, I guess, caution all of us from using the word completely negatively because I mean, without tech debt, there is no tech, I think. But besides that, one of the things that I know now that I didn't know then from being a PM is that platforms, systems, they're products, right? Like so when you're building a shared platform for your developers or for your business units so they can move and ship software faster, you're building a product. And I often see companies build these as a set of tools versus a product. And if you don't think of the platform as a product, then you're probably going to get the demand wrong, right? So the one of the biggest things with product management is measuring what your users need, prioritizing these features against each other, and then delivering the thing that's the most valued soonest, right? So as you're looking at maybe evaluating your tech debt, you also need to look at what your user sort of persona is and what's going to help them do their job better. And I say all that because if 80% of your applications are like older, more legacy, and you're focusing on how you're going to improve the sexy new functions as a service based asynchronous application, you're not really focusing on your business challenges, right? So don't ignore what's right in front of you. You have to do the gritty hard work of making the current systems that you have better. It's easy to try and rip and replace with a brand new thing, but I think um, we should be spending more time optimizing what we already have. And to that end, when you're building a platform, make sure that you include the stakeholders of the people that you don't really talk to as much, that are running out of some old IBM software. You know what I mean? Figure out how to put that maybe in a container, which you can, and maybe get some more availability or get some redundancy out of it. But just don't ignore that legacy stuff. Anyway, that was tangential completely. So hopefully there's something worthwhile listening to in there.
Yes, the one thing that you brought up around the negativity around technical debt, you're absolutely right. I actually love that you brought that up because you're right. Technical debt isn't supposed to be negative. It's actually an investment in the way you build a business and build applications and build services that support that business, right? You're going to encounter situations where things just simply don't work and you have to drop it and move on or move forward, or the reverse where you have to keep building on top of it because you have no other option. So yes, it's not meant to be negative, and I apologize if I came across that way initially. The point of the matter is like technical debt is absolutely required to make things move forward for innovation, for us to be able to make decisions around how to optimize something, how to make it better, how to run it in a different manner so that it's better for us. Now, having said that, let's talk about platforms for a second and what actually a platform is. So to me, Google Cloud is a platform. GKE is a platform in itself. Kubernetes is a platform that offers up pluggable architecture. What are we trying to do in terms of building elegant platforms? Like, why are we here today to talk about platforms, platform engineering, IDPs? Why does that matter? Nick, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay, so let's turn back time a little bit. Let's go back to the birth of DevOps. This is funny too, the birth of DevOps, right? So when cloud first became, I think, big, right? When Amazon came out shortly thereafter, both of my former employees, um, you had this, like, I remember working with customers and working with end users who were in the business units, not as much IT. And they were trying to move really quick. They were running away from their tech debt, right? They were running away from the time it takes to get a VM on-prem or in their colo. And they were running towards the cloud because it was a simpler way to get the computers they needed when they needed them. So during that time, there became this sort of notion of DevOps and automation and running fast. And I mean DevOps in the absolute jargon way, not the real term. We know that DevOps is actually just a philosophy, but I'm talking about continuous integration and deployment and all the technical things they try to sell you with DevOps. But so anyway, so these business units would stack together DevOps engineers, operations, and developers, and they would move really quickly in the cloud. And imagine like you're an enterprise company and this happens 2 or 3 times. Now you have 3 separate instances of these pairings that are running out there in the cloud and probably okay. But then all of a sudden finance becomes aware that, oh man, maybe we're not really managing our costs super well here. There's some inefficiencies. And we're doing like a wholesale move to the cloud for all of the applications. So we probably should put a little more thought into how we're approaching cloud. Um, and so when I think early on, I guess my point is that early on, people were optimizing for moving fast, and then as you mature in the cloud, you're probably optimizing for cost savings, governance, regulations, and stuff like that. And so you end up taking all of these spoke teams and trying to centralize them, right, in the name of governance and efficiency. And so that I think is where platform engineering is now becoming a big deal because you have all these companies who are trying to sort of corral everybody into a common platform to save money and to put up guardrails. Um, yeah, so that's where I think platform engineering is sort of popping up a lot right now. And I'll say this too, because I know I get in a little bit of a holy battle with this. Um, because when you build a platform, you're building a product. Make sure that you interview your users and build a product that meets their requirements. Okay. So I know this is inflammatory, but that doesn't mean that every single platform has to have a UI. If your users' life would be easier, or they would improve their release cadence, or something good would happen if you built a UI, and the cost of building that UI is cheaper than the cost of not doing it, then by all means do it, or just buy a piece of software that already gives you that. But it's not a hard requirement to have a UI in front of a platform engineer. You very well can have a set of tools that are not UI based.
So let me ask you something else. You mentioned
Yeah.
that you want to gather more feedback from your users, right? What kind of feedback are you looking for? What are some of the things that you're asking them to help them build a better platform?
Yeah. So for one, like you talk to enough of your end users and you try to develop a persona, right? Like you might have several types of personas. You might have some of your users might be like traditional developers who, I don't know, they use VS Code and a stack of tools. Others might be data scientists. You might have some folks that are just shipping off the shelf software. So your users can really vary. You just need to identify them and then talk to them, ask them what their preferences are, try to figure out what their pain points are. There's no real easy way to do it. You really have to get out there and communicate and make sure that line of communication is open so that if they put in an issue or they have any sort of concerns, they can come to you directly. Kelsey used to do this in Google, and I think it's well known, but he used to do these customer empathy sessions, and they're so critical. You basically you open the door to a discussion with the people that are using the software that you're building and figure out where the gaps are and basically who they are and how you can help solve them and make their lives better.
Now, is that something product management should own as a feedback mechanism, or is that something that could be extended to advocacy, like developer advocacy? Because Kelsey is a developer advocate at heart, and one of the natures of what we have to do here is collect that feedback from the community and return that back to our organization so that they can build better software. What does that mean for an organization like Google? How does that get handled there, the feedback loop and mechanism?
Yeah, I'd say like my particular example with Kelsey, I mean, of course, dev advocates are top of the funnel and they're getting that feedback and bringing it back in, as well as customer engineers, anybody who's field facing, all of that stuff's getting aggregated. What Kelsey did was, I mean, honestly, frankly, like shook a couple of PMs and said, "Hey, we need to listen. You need to get in there and hear it firsthand too, right? So you can get those signals through other avenues within the organization, but you also, it's important, I think, to get in front of customers and get in front of your users, not even customers in this case, and really hear it firsthand so you can have that live dialogue. Um, yeah. So it comes in all shapes and forms. Not one is more valuable than the other, but in the aggregate, I think you need all of them.
I'll pass it back to Akansha. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Nick, you talked a lot of things such as good and bad effects of tech debt, right? Now, I do understand that there is a need for a certain amount of tech debt, but now I have a question. When the tech debt actually starts becoming a problem, how are some metrics that you use to actually determine whether it's an issue or not? And are the like same metrics included when considering KPIs for platforms when dealing with it?
I don't know if I'm going to be able to dole out KPIs and official metrics, but I think if you're familiar with the Dora metrics, are you familiar with those DevOps research assessment metrics? It's what is it? It's the golden signals, and then it also has to do with the rate of that you're shipping software.
Yeah,
I
we
think if
actually talked about this last week. We had
okay, cool.
Michael from GitLab. So perfect. Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, so I mean, those signals are good measurements, especially like the rate at which you're delivering software, right? If your ability to if your ability to meet customer demand is hindered by your ability to deliver software, there's a good chance that you've got some tech debt built up that's preventing you from excuse me, preventing you from moving quickly. But one of the things actually it's funny, one of the things that's most often overlooked when people are analyzing, why they're maybe a little bit slower or where the bottlenecks are is that they always focus on the tech, to be honest. A lot of the times it's not the tech. And um, if you're familiar with Dora and you're familiar with all the great work that Nicole and Gene Kim and everybody have done, then you're also probably familiar with the idea that of the theory of constraints. And so I'd say that if you're reading signals or if you're observing like a loss in market share or an inability to meet the demands of your customers, you want to figure out where your constraint is, where your bottleneck is. And maybe that's tech, maybe it's organizational, but until you remove that particular constraint or bottleneck, you're pretty much going to remain in the same position. So don't get distracted by necessarily just distracted by all the tech stuff. Like if you know that there's like an organizational constraint that's slowing you down, you're not going to fix your bottleneck by addressing anything else other than that constraint, right?
Yeah. So, like, I have heard a couple of podcasts hearing about some consequences of tech debt and benefits they got from fixing those. So, for example, there was one story where the entire operations cost dropped by 500,000 USD by just fixing that debt. So, I'm really curious to hear about what are some form of debt that you have seen, like in your experience.
Oh, sure. Well, for one, there's the whole world is running on probably what AS400s mainframes, right? Some people would perceive those as tech debt, but I think I'm of the school of if it don't work, if it's not broke, maybe you don't need to fix it. But um, the issue with like technologies that are that old is and how it's coming to create issues for us going forward is the fact that there's just not enough people who know how to write COBOL, right? So like that tech debt is real for companies who are maintaining software that's running on mainframes right now today. So it's not even whether or not the actual software is poorly written because it's probably awesome. Um, I mean, it's expensive to maintain, but what do you do when the number of human beings that exist on this planet to fix the bugs in your code are down to less than a 0.5% or something? So that tech net debt's real, and it's a really tough, it's a really challenging one for companies to address because a lot of the times these are business critical, highly critical applications, and unwinding them and turning them into x86 workloads running on Linux or something is a significant effort. Um, and I don't think I've only seen like maybe one or two companies kind of pull it off. And the way that they did it was they honestly they rewrote. They started to like use strangular techniques to move certain parts of the stack that were running on these legacy like mainframes out into Linux somewhere, and then slowly pulled apart the entire system until I want to say on the average of like 5+ years they finally got off. And that wasn't even a big implementation. So that's one example of tech debt. Um, how about you, Marina? You have any examples that you've come across? I know you were out in the field for a long time.
Yeah. I have stories that I can go on for hours, right? Like when you think about building networks is a classic example of where technical debt has to form. When I was actually let's go by years because I don't want to age myself or date myself. Back in 2020, 2012, I joined this organization that was looking to overhaul a lot of their networks. They actually wanted to refresh everything. They wanted to refresh network devices. They wanted to optimize connectivity, reduce ping times, reduce latency, etc. And it seemed like a very cool project until you showed up to their facility, their office, and you actually start to notice what actual tech debt looks like in the form of Cat3 cabling. So, it's interesting the way people will apply band-aids on top of band-aids. A long time ago, that building was constructed with Cat3 wiring to provide 10 megabits per second Ethernet access to a lot of different locations in that facility. And then, you fast forward and you realize 10 megabits per second doesn't cut it, especially if it's, what's the word? Shoot. Half duplex. Half duplex is actually an issue. The
Right.
concept, yeah, the concept of half duplex is you can only send in one direction at a time. You can't send and receive at the same time. So you actually only truly have 5 megabits of bandwidth to work with if you're deciding you wanted to send and receive. Reality is you can't. You can only use one way. Now that's technical debt because you can't easily just remove and rip wires out without actually harming the building itself. So what do? Okay, well, let's just make bigger holes all over the place and layer in more wires. Okay, now you've layered in Cat 5. Great. We got up to 100 megabits per second for short distances. Oh, hold on a second. We want to start using SAN technology. We also want to be able to create some redundancy within our facility so our racks are disparate. What does that mean for us? We're going to have to lay more wire. Oh, are we going to have to lay Cat 6 now? This is technical debt because what you're effectively doing is you're painting on top of the layer, and then you keep painting on top of that layer until you have infinite layers of paint, and you just made your room a lot smaller. This is the exact same thing of creating band-aids on top of band-aids or putting band-aids on top of band-aids to hold up some sort of architecture or infrastructure, which is ultimately your technical debt. At some point in time, that could collapse, right? Or not, right? It could just continue to work and you could continue to add more wires. And, at some point you've achieved nirvana with your connectivity. And quite honestly, you start to realize, what have we truly done here? And the case is very similar to when you were in a data center and you see spaghetti everywhere. It's so easy to just take a wire, plug it into one port, and then take that same wire, plug the other into another port without actually tracing it through a racetrack or something like that, creating some level of organization. Because it's easy, it's shortcuts. We'll take shortcuts to get there. And that shortcut will contribute to an amount of technical debt where you're in the situation trying to troubleshoot connectivity of a server to another storage array, and you're now staring at a wall of spaghetti because you continually decided to say, hey, I'll just take one wire, plug it in here, take the other end and plug it in there without doing any sort of organization or cable organization. That is technical debt. There are other forms too where I've seen organizations overlook life cycling, updating their firmware on hardware, right? And that creates another form of technical debt where now you have aging firmware on a lot of your systems, which causes incompatibility. And now you have to sit there and spend the time to either do one of two things: throw it all in the garbage or spend the time to actually update everything. And this all is actually activities we used to do. We don't do them as often anymore because we've learned from some of these mistakes. Technical debt actually creates the mistakes that allows us to learn from them and effectively be better the next time around. We don't do this anymore because of technical debt, and that's your positivity for a moment. Nick, I hope that gives you a good example of what I saw on the field. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
you're
man.
you're triggering things, man.
Oh no, you were triggering me in ways that are different too. So I actually have tech debt in my house. Okay, so when my wife and I moved out of Midtown, like I was saying earlier, we bought a new house. We were lucky enough to get one. The builder put Cat 5 in. Right, we're talking 7 years ago. He installed Cat 5 in the walls. I was like, dude, you basically just there was no point. You bottleneck my whole house. I may as well just use Wi-Fi. So I've since had to like rip and replace all of that, and I of course put in Cat 7. But yeah, so I bought a brand new house and had tech debt on day zero. It's amazing. Yeah, no, those are really good stories, Marino. And I think like looking back at like now as a PM and the history of being an engineer and a CE, of all the sort of things that I've gone through, the thing that stands out to me is that the companies that I worked for that did it really well were the ones who left enough room as far as capacity, for like human being capacity, to spend time to analyze and understand where you're at and where you want to go. Um, if as a company you're always looking to ship new features, for example, or you're always looking ahead and you don't spend some time to really look at where you're at right now and understand maybe how you can navigate into the future with a little bit more preciseness, you're probably gonna be what you were talking about, Reader. You're gonna be that stack of layers of band-aids. So you got to take some time to slow down, get the Neosporin out, take a couple of band-aids off. Honestly, I don't know if I have the authority to say this, but I feel like it should be 50-50, right? You should be spending as much time fixing software, improving it, reevaluating as you are shipping new stuff. Unfortunately, that's not the name of the game with capitalism, but so we often are getting less than 50% of the time to do that. But I think it's important. And the hardest part for everyone on this call is, including myself, is how do you convince the business that this is the right thing to do? And the only way you could do that is by describing tech debt, showing um, downtime as a result of the tech debt, talking through Dora metrics and explaining how speed, the rate of delivery of software is directly correlated to business success. It's tough to do, and a lot of the times they don't want to listen, but we all have to keep on saying it over and over until they get it.
I wanted to follow on with that because if you were at KubeCon, I was too, and we saw a lot of interesting stuff going on with respect to some of the themes and some of the motions of where people should focus their energy on. And a lot of that was around IDPs and platform engineering. When you think about that, has what's been going on in KubeCon, in the CNCF, in what we do in Cloud Native, created a form of technical debt to kind of push us in a different direction? Do you think AI is also helping add to that technical debt or removing some of it? Oh shoot, we lost Nick. Dang it, where'd you go? Um, all right, let's bring Nick back up. Nick, are you there? Nick, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry about that. I put a budget on my phone for the amount of time that I could use Twitter, and it
Ah, I
just
love it.
burned me right in the middle of this. So I apologize. It's probably going to happen again in 15 minutes. Yeah, so the AI, I think I missed a little bit of what you said, but I'm pretty sure I know what you were getting at. And AI for me it's interesting because I do think that it's game changing, right? And I don't know if I like the game it's changing to, but I will acknowledge that it's going to change everything, and it has and will continue to do so. But I also think there's someone's going to write an amazing book after all this is done, and it's going to be like the cost of tech fad, like the cost of a particular tech fad on society was, like what was the cost of crypto? Like how many features, how many things out there, how many problems didn't get solved because so many people were focused on trying to make money with crypto, right? I feel like it's going to be similar with AI, but maybe at the end there's actually a worthy outcome. But I struggle there because human beings are the ones, and corporations are the ones that are driving these outcomes, and we know what they want, and it's not always in line with what's good for us as humans. So I don't know, to be determined on that. I do think that there's a significant amount of resources across all the companies everywhere that are being focused on AI, and there will be, and there is a cost to that as far as things that likely would have been built that it won't. be built.
I agree. I mean, I think a lot of us get into a bit of an exploratory phase. We're curious, and so AI enters the chat, and there are things that we want to start building. And I'm guilty of this. I'll start trying to build something with, let's say, generative AI, and I don't really complete the task, and that's my own issue. I have my own internal issues that I have to work through with working through to completion. But the reality is, I think a lot of us do something very similar. We'll start a task or we'll start something towards building out a feature and we'll drop it, or we won't make much progress on it, and then time passes and it becomes irrelevant. And there is a learning from that, right? It's the learning to not just do that again. I think we're those type of people and creatures that will just repeat these same patterns over and over and over again, regardless of that advice. But that creates that technical debt. We write something, we write a feature, and it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, I call this Wall Street driven development. So, you know, like the money needs to go up. How do you make the money go up? Well, Wall Street needs to think that what you're making is going to make their money go up, and so you end up building a slew of features to drive a markety sort of demand that just causes like stock prices to go up for a publicly traded company, and that's very much what I think drives our industry a little bit more than it should. And I don't know how to fight it, man. Sorry, just being a little honest here. But well, thankfully, I am not specifically on a team of humans that are building this type of tech. I am focused on distributed systems problems, boring old stuff that will probably continue to be boring until someone creates a generative AI that replaces me.
Well, I think the first step in what we're doing, right, driving awareness around what technical debt is and how that's tied to platform building, platform development, but noticing it, right? Realizing that things we do, the subtle things that we work on, add to that. And look, Kat just entered the chat. Welcome, Kat.
Hey, thanks for being patient while I found a good spot at the airport. I've been listening to the
What's it?
talk and having fun. You're covering a lot of stuff. I wanted to actually jump in if I could.
Go for it.
So, tech debt is often seen as neglected code or features or maintenance, things like that, right? Um, but a lot of that ends up being a side effect of and a symptom of cultural situations. And I'm curious, especially Nick, since you have spent some time as a PM now, how has your perspective grown or matured, or how has it changed since taking on the PM role with regards to seeing the general culture? So you alluded a little bit to, Wall Street driven development, things like that. And I'm completely on board with how you see that picture. But I'd love to get more insights on how you see culture in general feeding tech debt or tearing it down as you've seen it.
I appreciate that. It's interesting. So culture is probably the most important thing, and often, in my opinion, from all of the end users and customers that I've worked with in this space for the past decade, it's often the bottleneck, right? Like the constraint is something cultural. Like the trust isn't there, or just people aren't talking to each other. Um, since I've moved into PM, I mean, I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid. If you know me, you know that I don't just say things. I actually, my particular team's culture is amazing. And what makes it amazing for me is that I've got a stack of leadership above me who's pretty clear about what they want, but also willing to listen and to adjust. So the lines of communication are open. Um, I feel like I have impact, right? You always want to go to work and feel like what you say matters, and so I'm in a pretty good space now. But I've also been in roles where it's very top down. um, Very top down, but top down across multiple silos. And so there's never really like a clear goal at the organizational level because each little mini fiefdom's got its own goal. And then it's top, it takes, that sort of like capitalistic we need to make money, and then at all costs push that down onto everyone below us. Not sure if I've got anything super insightful to say other than I'm pretty happy now. And like I said, the communication channels are hugely important to me, going both ways. Also respect. I mean, if you work for a company and they don't respect you, or others, and I'm fully aware of the current economic times, right? So sometimes you just have to get a paycheck, but if you can find a way out, get out. It's just not worth it. Got to have that respect. I think this is what they call dead air in the industry. Way to go, Nick.
Yeah, Nick, you're supposed to keep going. I'm just playing, man. All right, no, that's some great info, and quite honestly, the perspectives that you've offered of how you look at it from the lens of a PM is important because there are a lot of different ways to assess technical debt and then additionally assess platform building and combining those two. And I think like as a PM, you start to realize that sometimes there are so many different directions you can go in for one, but two, that feedback is definitely is so critical to drive you in the right direction.
Yeah, you need to open those lines of feedback and be willing to hear them, and you also have to be willing to be wrong, right? If the feedback that you don't manipulate the data so that you're right. Just listen to the data and then think about it and let it lead you in the way that it should. Um, and again, I think if there's anything smart I said on this space, which is probably not a lot, it's you need to give yourself room. Like as an organization, if you have the power to give your people room to think and to operate and to analyze where they're at and adjust, you have to do it. You can't just be full. If you're full, you're overextended, right? If you're working 120%, or if you're working 100%, it's like you're working 120, 150%. You'll never be in a position in which you're okay. You need to be at, like, I don't know, there's probably real metrics out there, 70, 80%. Like you need that time to deal with things as they blow up, and then also to think about the future. Yeah, so hopefully this has been helpful. I don't know if I've got piles of more things to say. Happy to answer any questions that folks have, though.
So I thought Akansha is still around, but perhaps she might be on the road or something of that nature. But I think this would be a great time to start wrapping up this space and really, driving some of those key points around what technical debt, how it contributes to building some platforms, and how that ties to platform engineering and what we've seen over the decades. Like we've talked about some really good examples of different forms of tech debt and how that positively has contributed to some strong innovation. On the other hand, I mean, there is wastage that comes about because of this technical debt. But quite honestly, I think there are a lot of different ways to approach it. There are a lot of different ways we can optimize the way we use technology. But at the same time, we have this Twitter space, we can go back and review it and then catch those tips on how to optimize on that tech debt. Akansha, Kat, any final words, thoughts, feedback?
Yeah, I'm sorry, like my mic is not working. And yeah, so like Nick, thank you for like sharing your wealth of experience and knowledge like involved in all this tech debt and how to go about it. I also personally learned that tech debt isn't always bad. And yeah, and I hope that all the audience will in this chat also learned a lot in this discussion. So yeah, thank you so much, Nick, for sharing and coming today.
No, thank you. It was a blast.
Fantastic. Yes. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming by again. Thank you, Akansha and Kat, for being excellent co hosts. And Nick, again, fantastic knowledge. I'm happy that you came up here and we were able to talk about some of these key topics in our space and in what we do in cloud native and cloud. Next week, we have another Twitter space. Akansha, do you want to share what we're going to be talking about in that one?
Yeah, so we have Neil, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but yeah,
Neela.
so Neela, yeah, okay. So she's coming up and we will talk all about observability. So it's a different topic we have not picked up in the past few weeks. So yes, feel free to join us and we will be sharing all the details, graphics, and Twitter Space details very soon. And yeah, we are excited for that.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. And don't forget to follow Nick. Nick, final words?
Um, no, I hope everyone has gets some downtime coming up, and you know, technology is one thing, life is much more important. So get your priorities straight and live long and prosper. Take it easy.